Hello, and thank you for joining us for the TAA webinar, Why You Should Consider Self-Publishing and Print on Demand, presented by Bob Hoyt. Bob received his medical education at Virginia Commonwealth University. While still on active duty in the U.S. Navy, he became interested and involved with multiple implementations of health information technology. As a result of this experience and additional education at Stanford University, he created a medical health informatics program at the University of West Florida in 2004. He noted early on that there were no current and practical textbooks on the subject, so he launched Health Informatics, Practical Guide for Healthcare and Information Technology Professionals in 2007, published by lulu.com. The sixth edition was launched in 2014 and is available in print, PDF, and Kindle versions. He has also been involved with clinical and informatics research over the past decade and has published and lectured extensively in these areas. Hello, Bob. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kim. This is Bob Hoyt. I look forward to delivering this webinar on self-publishing. Let me say from the first slide that my wife has been extremely involved in this whole process. I'm going to be presenting this, but she really was the person who decided that self-publication was not only reasonable, but that we would go in that direction. So what we're going to be talking about in the next 30 minutes or so is how to build your own book or self-publishing. There's three general areas that we will cover. One is the recent trends in self-publishing. The second is our journey, how did we do it, and what were the lessons learned. And lastly, discuss the pros and cons of self-publishing, hopefully in a very objective manner. Now, health informatics as a topic is very rapidly changing, not just because the field of medicine is changing and technology is changing, but multiple government programs keep changing as well. So it is important to stay up to date. The textbooks I initially looked at in 2004 when I began teaching were written at the PhD level. They were quite historical, boring, and really had no interesting web links or case studies. So we wanted, first of all, a platform to write a book that was published rapidly and our ability to every couple of years publish a new edition. This would require a lot of control and flexibility. We also wanted to keep the book more like a workbook and keep the cost down for students. It wasn't our goal to make a lot of money on this project, but we definitely had cost in mind. And we also were interested in attracting overseas readers because we knew early on from emails and other communication that a lot of countries were interested in this topic. Now, we could have gone the commercial publisher route, and actually I've had several experiences with that, and they weren't particularly favorable, primarily because of how long it took to actually generate the final print book. It is true they handle the formatting, the proofreading, the marketing, take a lot of that off of you, but they own the intellectual property, and often they charge in the neighborhood of 90%. They get that 90% of the profits. It takes several years to publish, and in one instance of personal experience, 4 years. We found this to be highly inflexible in a content area that required flexibility. Now, this is just a definition from Wikipedia, but I think it nicely covers the fact that the author basically has complete responsibility, which means they have to do some background work like designing covers and formats and proofreading that you wouldn't have to do if you had a commercial publisher, but they can do all of it themselves or they can outsource it, and we'll cover that by discussing several self-publishing vendors. I remind people too that you can self-publish other things than just standard print textbooks. You can certainly create instructor manuals or departmental manuals fairly inexpensively this way, and again, get them out the door and make them accessible fairly rapidly. Historically, self-publishers were glutton for punishments because it was difficult to do without digital printing. It was expensive. It often involved a place to store the textbooks you wrote, which might mean a warehouse, but all of this has changed. After 2008, more books were actually self-published than commercially published, and that was due to several factors that we'll review in the next few slides. The first reason was print on demand, which I'll cover in another slide, but this was made available with digital printing. Secondly, almost everybody was familiar with ebooks, and almost everybody owned a reader such as an iPad or a Kindle. With the advent of Amazon doing pretty much everything, which included a bookstore and a Kindle store, it wasn't difficult to view books or buy books, and other stores like Barnes & Noble and so forth appeared, so it became quite easy to sell your book and to buy a book using the internet. Now, print on demand simply means that a book is printed only after it's ordered or purchased. In that way, there's not a backlog or warehousing of the books. And this is made possible through digital printing. There are a lot of companies such as Lulu, we'll discuss in more detail, CreateSpace, iUniverse, and Smashword, which allow single books to be published very quickly, professionally, and economically. Early on, maybe 15 years ago, there was criticism that the books didn't look as professional, but now that can't be said. In terms of ebooks, there are multiple formats. EPUB is a standard. Mobi is Kindle. PDF we'll discuss in a minute. AZW. Ebooks are quite popular, and they account for about 27% of adult book sales. Pew Research in 2014 showed that about 28% of Americans read ebooks and 46% own a reader. Now, that we mentioned the PDF format for several reasons. First of all, it is stable once you've converted it from, say, Word to PDF. It's stable. It includes hyperlinks, and you can create a table of contents that's excellent and hyperlinks to each chapter. There's also a search mechanism on a PDF that's quite good, so you don't really need an index. The problems with PDFs are twofold. One, it's not distributable on Amazon, which would be desirable. And second of all, it's not reflowable. And all that means is that if it's an EPUB ebook, it can tell the difference between a 7-inch and a 9-inch screen, and it will just increase in size to match the screen size. With the PDF, it stays the same size, although you can usually expand it or pinch it, but it's not automatic. We'll start by discussing Lulu, who's been our publisher now since about 2006. They will print both hard copy and paperbacks. Our books are paperbacks. The books are sold on their site as well as distribution. They can generate either a PDF or EPUB. We've only chosen a PDF through them. I mentioned the cost to publish our book. It depends obviously on how big the book is and the page size. Our book is about 515 pages, so that if I wanted to buy one as an author, it's about $18, which is our cost to us. It is convenient. I might mention that if you want to ship a book to somebody, you can do it through their website easily, keep their address and so forth. And as each new version, if they want a desk copy, you can do it that way, or you can mail a desk copy on your own. The time to print and ship is 10 days. You actually can shorten it shorter than that, although most people wouldn't care if it was shorter than that. The authors receive about 90% of the ebook net revenues and about 80% for the print books and 40% through distribution. CreateSpace is popular as a self-publishing site. It's owned by Amazon, so it means it has worldwide distribution. There are some professional services available to augment what you believe you can do. Formatting tools are included. You can use as input either a PDF or Microsoft Word, and the author gets about 50% of net revenue. Smashwords is another popular site. They have about 250,000 books listed. It creates only ebooks, not print books. It accepts Microsoft Word documents as input, and there are tools there for the creation of your book. There's marketing and distribution help as well. Authors get about 85% of the proceeds. Kindle is an interesting alternative, at least it was for us, because we wanted a distribution through Amazon with the ebook, and the Kindle was a way to do that. I'll mention that we use Scrivener to generate the .mobi document that must be uploaded, and we'll cover that in a minute. The author gets about 35%, and it's largely intended for fictional works. There has been some criticism that the images and tables don't project as well. That is not a matter of increase in the dots per inch, I might add. And recently, Kindle states that they have improved that, but we have not resubmitted to Kindle to republish our book to find out if that's actually true or not. iUniverse is an interesting publishing site. It's not really a do-it-yourself site, but if you decide you don't want a commercial publisher and you literally want them to do everything, they're happy to do it, but for a higher charge. It also takes longer, 60 to 90 days, and the author only gets about 25% of the retail price, 50% for the ebooks. We recently found another alternative, and that's redshelf.com. This is basically an ebook vendor that instead of you hosting the book or looking at the book on a tablet, they host the ebook online, and they have the annotation tools so that perhaps your laptop then becomes like a tablet for reading a book. It does allow you to download a certain percent, I believe it's 20%, offline, so if somebody's on a trip and they don't have internet access, they can read it offline, at least part of the book. So you can basically buy a lifetime access to a book or simply rent it for 3, 4, 6, or 12 months. Our book was tried at Rutgers University with about 50 students, and I'm waiting on feedback to see how that went. I wasn't aware of any technical issues, and there's good analytics from Red Shelf to let you know who the students were and so forth. This is a cost saving for students. I believe my book for 4 months was $17 for the students. Now we're going to discuss some of the other things you need beside a book. Obviously, you want a high-quality book, excellent authors or co-authors, and you would like endorsement by a parent organization. But in addition, you will need an ISBN number. Ironically, it's usually $125 for one or $250 for 10. Usually advise you to get more than one simply because you may have an electronic version, print, and other versions. You will need a distribution channel like Lulu, Amazon, or Ingram. You'll have to develop a marketing and pricing strategy. Clearly, we wanted to price our book below the competition, but there really wasn't that much competition. Our marketing strategy was pretty simple. It really was to work strongly on word of mouth, to go to trade shows, advertise, or comment to other faculty members in this specialty area. We found a newsletter to be very helpful, and we use MailChimp. We have now about 287 faculty members in this country and overseas who have requested a copy of the book, and we communicate with a couple of times a year. You will likely need to set up a business entity. We set up a sole proprietorship, which has been excellent. It has a lot of benefits and really no downside to it. It's quite simple. You don't need an accountant or a lawyer actually to do it. It is, I would say, fairly mandatory to create a website in order to market, sell, and provide downloads to both faculty and students. And so there's an ecosystem, if you will, that surrounds your book. Most people would advise you to also use Facebook and Twitter. Really and truly, our website really takes the place of that. Others may choose, though, to emphasize the social media more than the website. Clearly, if what you're writing is a scientific book where you have extensive bibliography, the software these days, it really helps. EndNote, Cetera, Mendeley, or Sente. I'm using Sente currently, and it really helps because you can literally cut and paste references into your the end of an article or chapter. This has really saved me a lot of time. We do go to trade shows, for instance, the Health Information Management Systems Society, or HIMSS, has an annual conference of about 30,000 attendees. So we man a university booth, talk about courses we teach, but also have the book available so people can look at it. We can also go to the other universities and show them that we have a new edition. It's just one example. Now, the website that we have is informaticseducation.org, and the reason I mention that simply is to go through some of the different sections of it, because I think it's very apropos to other people who would like to publish a textbook. The About Us tab talks about us and hyperlinks to lectures and so forth. Tells them how to sign up for a newsletter. Most of the proceeds of the book go to grants. So there's a one-page application for grants that are rolling or constantly being offered, and there's a frequently asked questions section. The textbook tab doesn't sell any textbook. It simply links to information. It talks about the 6th edition, presents a table of contents, tells who the authors are, where they are, and it lists the universities in the United States and overseas that are using the textbook. The purchase text tab does not, again, sell any textbook, but it does link to Lulu, for instance, and it tells viewers where they can purchase the ebook, the print book, and they can actually order individual chapters for $2.99, how to get the Kindle version, the rental version, and they can actually do a site license. We have done 3 or 4 site licenses to largely medical libraries in this country and in Canada who chose to do that, so they were able to have the textbook behind their firewall, and more than one section of their university could use it. For instance, it might be used in an informatics class, but also be used by the nursing school or the medical school. Instructor tab, if they register and I approve their credentials, which is fairly easy, they must have an EDU address. They can download a Kindle version, the PDF version, the instructor's manual, and slides. We also offer a free sample chapter, which I would recommend. There's a tab for a resource center, and here's the thinking behind that. The book has 22 chapters. We took the bibliography from those, but we constantly update them. So the 6th edition was printed in January 2014. Since then, we've continued to do a literature search, and we've added chapters to it. When and if we print a 7th edition, we'll already have done a lit search to by and large, and we can use that. But this is largely created for students, informatics students who are writing point papers. They can go here and search for articles. And there's a blog tab where, number one, I have a blog on informatics topics, and there are RSS feeds regarding informatics news. Resources, I mentioned a simple book by Carla King that you can get on Kindle. There's also a little bit longer book that looks good called Self-Publishing for Dummies that you can get through any bookstore like Amazon. Most of the vendors, such as Lulu, provide a lot of educational content on their website in terms of how to create your own self-published textbook. I mentioned an international audience because that may or may not be important to your specialty or your area of interest. It was for us. Therefore, we're in the process of writing a new chapter on international informatics because a lot of people reach out to us from basically each continent. We found a simple add-on piece of software, some HTML I had to add from a vendor called Sistran. So now the website is available in 5 languages. We are attempting to make the textbook multilingual in other ways. We're going to, in communication with, for instance, a medical school in Brazil, to have the textbook translated to Portuguese, and perhaps we're going to use translation software to do the heavy lifting. But the bottom line is it's probably smart today, in today's world, to ask yourself, are you really maximized to appeal to an international audience? Now, there are challenges behind what we did or what anybody would do with self-publishing. The first one was fairly simple, and that was Microsoft Word is not ideal for a several hundred-page book if you have images and tables, and if it's a textbook, you likely will. And we'll review some of the other software that's out there. Proofreading is onerous, and it's not easy. As you get tired and get closer to publication, I think you glaze over as you review the book. Also, we found that a lot of the formatting can change from day to day with Microsoft Word, which is highly frustrating. You had everything exactly right, but when you submitted it to convert it to PDF, things moved. You will likely need software to create an index, and that can be upwards of $200 for that. For the print book, you don't need that for the PDF or Kindle. Now, just briefly mention some of the other desktop publishing software that's out there. If you're a big open source fan, Scribus is very good and very complete, comprehensive, but there'll be a considerable learning curve. A new one that I do like, and I think I may use for the 7th edition, is Lucid Press. This is completely web-based with a lot of features. They continue to add more and more features, and they let me know that they would offer this free for faculty and students. So this just locks in. If you put an image in, it'll go automatically into a box and it'll stay put. There is a learning curve, but from my experience, it didn't appear to be a very steep learning curve. Scrivener is very well known by fictional authors. It comes out of England. It's available for Windows and the Mac, and it will generate an EPUB and Mobi. So as I already mentioned, that's what I use to generate the Kindle book. Microsoft Publisher has been out a long time. It's not the most user-friendly, but you may already have it free if you have Microsoft Office suites. Apple is a more stable platform because it's more Linux-like, and it may be a better choice for your book, but still with some images and tables, you still may have some formatting problems. Last but not least is the industry standard, which is Adobe InDesign. It will do what you want, but it is a learning curve and it's expensive. Again, we have used Lulu since about 2006, and I've been very satisfied. We've not had any issues, be they technical or philosophical. I did find it amusing that early on people felt like, how could our textbook be of value if it was self-published and not from a major publisher? But now people have pretty well done an about-face on this and say this was a great idea because you're much more responsive, much more affordable. We launched the Kindle version about a year ago and the rental version quite recently. Now, book sales have been good and they continue to rise. The last figure here, 3.7 thousand, was April, so probably about 5,000 books sold by June, so hopefully 10,000 sold this year. they continue to go up. This slide and the next one were generated using IBM Watson Analytics, which, by the way, if you need that or use that as faculty members, is now free. So it shows you the paperback has always been the most popular by about 8-to-1 or 9-to-1. PDFs are second, Kindle third. Keep in mind that the electronic versions, though, are rising. On the far right, you see EPUB ebook. We did experiment with an Apple product or software called EPUB or iBook Author. It was difficult technically, and the sales were not very good. The books were intended only for the iPad, and it's hard for me to recommend that. This next slide was just generated from a spreadsheet Lulu generated to show book sales. And the lesson learned here is that the fall has always been the best time, the fall semester, for our sales. So even if you're very happy with the self-publisher, you do need to get your book outside of just that publisher through distribution channels such as Amazon or Ingram. You will sell a lot more books, but at a lower profit. But overall, that's a good thing. This just shows you, for us, no one major distribution channel was predominant. They're all about equal. So we pretty much concluded that Lulu was a very stable and reliable company for self-publication. And basically, if you don't charge the reader, they'll only charge a very low price to publish. So for instance, if you were going to develop some type of large document for your university, policies, procedures, whatever it is, they would basically charge you their base rate to publish it, but it would be quite inexpensive. As mentioned, we donate almost all of the profits towards informatics grants, so this is a nice way to return the profit to the community, and it's been very successful so far.
The pros then of self-publishing to me is, yes, you get higher profit. Much faster publication, if that's important. More affordable for students. Easier to communicate with the end user and the faculty of the end user. Easier to produce ebooks and Kindle and the like. Easier to correct errors and republish if you need to. Self-publishing cons are fairly straightforward. You got to spend some time. You have to have a loving wife. Something, hire a wife, whatever it takes. So you have to do that homework and be willing to do it or hire it out. Again, a combination would not be a bad idea. So basically, in conclusion, my wife and I would recommend self-publishing at print and an ebook. A PDF's not a bad way to go, again, for the reasons I mentioned. And start with that, and then consider where you want to go from there. But be sure to have these other pieces of the puzzle, such as a website, available to help with your textbook. And again, this was reviewed in Publishers Weekly.
So we do have a couple of questions. First is, did you create a foundation to accept and distribute the proceeds toward grants?
There is no foundation. We try to contribute either to a 501c3 type organization, or most universities have their own foundation. So if we're going to donate to UCLA, it's probably going to be to one of their foundations, which then turn around and reimburse the department or pay the department. But we don't have our own foundation, no.
Okay, before I take the next question, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, you can type it into the question box on your screen, and then I will read it for you. So the next question is, in academic circles, how would you overcome the stigma of self-publishing in different fields being seen as vanity press, particularly when committees are reviewing untenured faculty? How do you ensure validation of content and presentation through peer review?
Well, you certainly can have the book endorsed by somebody you respect in the field that writes the preface. As just one example, obviously you need to scrutinize your authors that they're published in the field But beyond that, I don't think that we attempted to validate above and beyond that. Our book also was endorsed by the American Medical Informatics Association, which I think endorses it as well. So we did not go beyond that level of validation.
Okay. Another question is, looking back, what would you do differently now that you're where you are with the book? Are there any things that happen, throughout the process that you wish would have done differently?
I would say probably nothing, which is surprising for me to say that. I think the toughest thing that has nothing to do with software or self-publishing is trying to get 15 or so authors who are extremely busy to have a chapter ready on time. So those deadlines have been very challenging. But in terms of using a different approach in some way, shape, or form, I don't think so, because we experimented constantly as we went along. And other than that one iBook author through iPad, which didn't turn out, we've been very fortunate. So there are very, very few regrets in this whole process.
All right. Did you create your own website or did you hire someone?
I'm the webmaster I'm sort of the master of my own fate. No, that was easy to do, and once again gives me flexibility. I use homestead.com. There's a ton of other ones, but no, that was quite easy, and it's a minimal skill set required, and it's just not bad for somebody to be familiar with that and to look at all the bells and whistles, because they might end up doing a much better job than we did. The website, by the way, you certainly can use to sell your book. The thing that discouraged us a little bit was setting state taxes and knowing how all that would financially work. So we opted not to sell any through our website.
All right. So the next question is, how did you decide pricing for your book?
Well, my wife can claim responsibility for that one, I guess, in the sense that she looked at somewhat comparable books, and we were probably roughly 20% below that, maybe more, let's say 25% less than either the print book or the e-book. It wasn't very scientific. That's roughly what we did.
Okay. Will you ever want to publish with a traditional publisher, or do you think this worked the best for you?
I think it's the best for me. I've had 2 negative experiences with commercial publishers so far, and I think that I'm biased towards self-publication at this point.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions on here right now. Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. So I might be done for the day. So thank you, Bob, for sharing your expertise with us, and thank you all for participating in today's presentation.
Thank you, Kim.
All right. Thank you.